All right, I want to welcome everyone in. I am excited to have Congressman Graves with us here today. I can say this about Congressman Graves. He's an amazing man, great leader. And Congressman Graves, you have always been there for us as a community when we are going through things, just like the hurricane that we just had to endure. And I am so glad to have you with us. And this is an important subject we're going to be discussing today. And it's on mandatory vaccination, religious exemption. And just like you've led the charge with helping us when we've been through natural disasters, you also lead the charge when it comes to things like this, when there's government overreach. But hey, welcome. I know you're in Washington, D.C., and so thank you for taking the time out and to do this interview. So you want to greet the people?
Yeah. First of all, brother, Mark, I want to thank you for the opportunity to join you again. And I want to thank you for your efforts to help to shepherd our community, lead our community, especially through times like this. The number of folks that we've run into that just have been through absolute devastation, whether it was a 2016 flood or Hurricane Ida or some of the other challenges, and to have members of the church to come in and lift them up and help them out. It is just absolutely priceless to many of these folks that are looking around that feel helpless. And so thank you for what you're doing. And for everybody who's watching, great to join y'all. I hope everybody's safe and happy. And in regard to hurricane recovery, we absolutely got a lot going on, and we're going to come back. We're going to come back much stronger than we were before. I'm confident.
Amen. Now let's jump into this issue of forced vaccination, mandatory vaccine. And just to start it off, I know Congressman Graves, I'm so sorry for this. I know you even lost your dad to COVID, and our prayers go with you. And
Thank you.
You have been vaccinated. And so when we talk about, being against mandatory vaccination, we're not against the vaccine or being vaccinated. We're just against the overreach of the government making this mandatory for everyone. Because in my case, I have not been vaccinated because I caught COVID very early. And after catching COVID, I was able to get through that, thank God. And then I had a natural immunity, and I caught the variant. And by taking just some medicines to mitigate that, it only lasted a couple of days and I was fine. And so I absolutely have no risk to myself personally. So why would I want to do, the vaccine? But it doesn't mean that you and I have to be enemies, and that's what's happening, the spirit of division, trying to divide our country where you vaxxed and unvaxxed. No, we're all Americans, and we need to love each other and respect each other's personal convictions, as well as encourage one another in your personal conviction. I thank God that you were able to get vaccinated, and I'm sure you have no problem with me making my decision. Is that true?
Absolutely. And look, I think it's great that we had this record speed, Operation Warp Speed, that President Trump and Vice President Pence started. They got a vaccine within 1 year. It normally takes 4 to 5 years. I think that's phenomenal, and it makes that tool available to people that exercise their discretion to take it. And I think it's fantastic that you have that option that's there. But this whole concept that the government can force people to inject something into their bodies is absolutely unacceptable. I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's tenuous legal ground. And it's absolutely unacceptable. I think it just violates fundamental principles.
And one thing, Congressman, is that right now, real time on the ground, what I'm hearing from people, hardworking Americans, hardworking Louisianians, is that they're afraid in the hospitals, even in these companies that are coming down upon people and telling them, if you do not get the vaccination, we're going to fire you. And you look at what's coming out of France, you look at what's happening in Australia, you look at what the airline's trying to do right now that you are working on and sending a letter out about that. It's causing people to go, wow, they're going to force us or they're going to fire us. And this is simply not okay. This is a loss of our freedom. And I want to bring up something is we have the option in Title VII, and I want to let people know this, the option in Title VII of the religious exemption, where we can actually fill out a religious exemption and basically make an appeal to the company that you're at and say, hey, my conviction, my religious conviction or philosophical conviction, I just don't feel I should do this. And according to Title VII, we ought to be given that. And I want to encourage people because, Congressman, what people are doing right now is they're quitting and they're going, okay, because I'm going to have to do that, I'm going to quit. And I just want to encourage everyone out there, don't quit because then you have no recourse. Go ahead and fill out a religious exemption. And when you fill out that religious exemption, if they refuse you that and fire you, then you have recourse to come back and to correct this wrong decision that these companies are making. Is that a good assessment?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And look, let's be clear here. There's a balance. If people make the decision to be vaccinated, that's great. And if not, I think we've got to make sure that we have the right mitigation measures to respect not just your freedom and liberties, but other people's as well. And I think employers have to adapt to that. But you got to go back and think about why we established America. Why did we declare our independence? And it was because we had government that was putting their thumb down on us and on our young territory and forcing us to do things that didn't represent our values. And so we declared our independence to where we could exercise freedom of religion, where we could exercise freedom of speech. And we've got to watch this very careful encroachment or movement right back to the type of structure of government and that thumb on you that we actually left, that we declared our independence from. We've got to remember the fundamental principles about why we established America and the rights that we fought for that are embodied in the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, and ensure that we, again, don't have this very slow encroachment into creating that same exact government structure that we established our independence from.
And the administration put out there, and this is just sad, where they called us who are not vaccinated, they called us flat earthers, like we're not believing in science. First of all, God said the earth was round way before scientists understood it was round. That was the whole reason Columbus sailed across the ocean, was because a Christian showed him in the scripture where God said he drew a circle on the face of the deep, which meant the earth was round. And so the idea that those of us who have evaluated and really on a religious conviction, because here's the religious conviction I want to just share with those who are going to be watching this. First of all, when Jesus died on the cross, he did not just die to save my soul, but he also died to buy my body. And so he bought my soul and my body. And what I put in my body is between me and my God, not me and my government. And it's important for us to distinguish that. And Rand Paul did a great job with talking about the natural immunity. And we are looking at the science. And the science is not the same as what the government, especially our executive office, is saying right now. And so we need to take a stance and push back against this. But again, I just want to say, don't quit your job. Put in religious exemption and philosophical exemption. Join together with this. And when they fire you, they're going to be in a bind with this. And because we're going to keep standing, and leaders like our Congressman Graves is going to stand up, like Rand Paul. All these guys are going to stand up and keep fighting on our behalf. And we need to stand up as well, even to our employers, with a proper appeal and saying, look, I have conviction in this, and we have that. Actually, you go to the Attorney General's webpage and you can pull down religious exemption and fill that out and give that to your company. And let's start the process of fighting back so we don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be afraid. We're in America, and we're not going to let happen here what's happening in France, what's happening in Australia, and maybe even some other countries. This is America. And if we allow, like you said, Congressman, if we allow this freedom to be taken, then they're not going to stop. They're going to keep taking more freedoms. And this whole government overreach has to stop. Take the flu. The flu kills thousands of people every year, unfortunately, and that's tragic. And yet the flu vaccination is not mandated. And so there's no precedent for this. We need to fight back. This is about just bullying people and seeing how far they can go. And Congressman, we need your help. One of the things, Congressman, I want to ask you about is for religious exempt people, we're going to need a card. We're going to need something that gives us the same freedom of movement to go to a ball game, the same freedom of movement to be able to get on an airplane or to move around or go to a restaurant with these draconian orders that are coming down. Could you guys in Washington work on some kind of identification that if we have religious exemption, we can have freedom of movement? Because right now we don't, Congressman. We do not have freedom of movement.
Well, look, taking a step back, what we're working on, and we've worked on amendments in various bills trying to actually prevent the mandate. That's what I think is the problem. So if we can withdraw the mandate, then we don't have this big fight on our hands. We withdraw the mandate. We allow for just appropriate mitigation measures for everyone's health and respecting their freedoms and their liberties. And that's really the solution that I think we're pushing. Now, secondly, is making sure that the religious exemption, that it is codified, it's memorialized, it's respected, and making sure that that's a viable option for people, because otherwise I do believe that that's infringing on our constitutional rights. And as I mentioned before, it's infringing on the very freedoms that we fought for and we declared our independence for. So I think that's the real solution is preventing the mandate from it being mandatory for everyone, and then ensuring that those people who choose to not get it, that the religious exemption is fully respected.
Well, I'll tell you what, I appreciate you guys fighting for this, but the problem is these executive orders. Because one of the things I would love to see in Washington, in our state of Louisiana, in towns, cities, parishes that we have in Louisiana, y'all have counties around the rest of the world, but we have got to get rid of executive orders. Executive orders is just another way of dictatorship. And it's because they refuse to work with the legislators. They feel like they can just do what they want through executive order. And I think that's the next big subject that we have got to bring to bear. I know here in Louisiana, whoever is going to run for governor next needs to make a commitment that he'll sign a law that will limit his executive orders and narrow the scope of what he can do even in emergency orders. And so I think that's a conversation that has to be had, because right now we're living in a dictatorship, a communism, and it has to change, Congressman.
You make a great point. So let's think about this for just a minute. So executive orders in some cases are almost like, as you alluded, almost like a substitute for a law. But an executive order is written by one person, signed by one person.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas, your ability to call President Biden is probably pretty limited. Whereas your ability to call your congressman or congresswoman or senator, that's much easier. And so that's where your voice is represented. An executive order totally circumvents your ability to be represented. It circumvents that. And what's happened, and I think something that we've all got to work on, the functionality of Congress, it's awful. I mean, it's not a functional organization. All it is people just fighting and fighting, and nothing's happening. So what the president's able to do is, as you have this dysfunction in Congress, as we're experiencing right now, the White House is able to take that void of what Congress is supposed to, that power void that Congress is supposed to be exercising, and he or she just steps in and says, I'm going to exercise it with the stroke of a pen. And so let me say it again. I think constitutionally it is absolutely tenuous, or it's out of bounds in regard to some of the scope of these executive orders. Number two, just really important to the individual American. This isn't you being able to be represented. This is one person making unilateral decisions. And that's really dangerous. It's a dangerous trend. And that's why I think that functionality of the Congress, of your representatives, has to be restored. We've got to fight for that, to where your voice can be heard, you can be represented. Because, I'll say it again, we declared our independence from a monarchy. We left it. Yet seeing, as you're alluding, these executive orders and this more power being amassed within the White House or the courts, or even through companies that are now coming in and saying, we're going to declare this or mandate that. I mean, that's the power of government largely being sucked up by corporations. All of those things are dangerous, I think, trends, and we've got to go back to the fundamentals as to why we established America and the fundamental freedoms or rights that we fought for.
Mr. Congressman, in about 30 seconds, we have about 30 seconds left. What can we do to stop these executive orders? Is there anything that we can do to stop them other than an election in 4 years? But then we're having the same problem. What can Congress do? What can the people do to stop these executive orders?
Well, one is challenging them in court. That's one thing, to help to relegate the authority of executive orders to much more narrow in scope and within the bounds of the law. Secondly is we do have to fight for the right people in Congress to make sure that we have the votes or the authority to step in and to put constraints or sideboards on the White House and respect the fact that we have three branches of government and all of them need to fully stay in their lane and not try and cross over and have the courts, have activist judges that effectively legislate from the bench, that we have presidents that step in and try and exercise unilateral authority of both the legislative and executive branch. That's not what the founders intended. And so I think those are the two things. One, challenging in court to help those things get resized back. And secondly, restore functionality of Congress, get the right people in there to where we can uphold the actual views, rights, and representation of the people we're supposed to be representing.
Well, Mr. Congressman, Congressman Graves, I thank you for coming today and interviewing with us and with all the folks that will be watching this. I want to thank all of you for clicking this. And look, share this. Share this with someone. This is so important. We're talking about America. We're talking about your freedom. We're talking about your life. And whether you've been vaccinated, not vaccinated, you know what? I think we can all agree that the mandatory overreach of the government is wrong. And that's where we stand. Is we can't have this overreach from our government and these mandatory vaccinations, these firings, this intimidation must stop. And you are part of that. And what we're doing right here, Congressman Graves, is a big part of helping you guys do your job as we show public dissent to what's going on right now. So God bless each and every one of you. And remember, share this. We love you, and I'll be praying for you. God bless.